This girl went up to her co-worker to ask him on a date, but Ju Hook's boss interfered and said he wanted to go too. In reality, Ju Hook couldn't go because he has to work overtime to finish the work. In that case, only the two of them should go. The girl then refused. She wasn't interested in the boss. She isn't that kind of girl. Ju Hook was trembling in his chair. This isn't the first time his boss disturbs him. Earlier, Ju Hook was working when his superior threw a paper ball at him. And it wasn't just one. He wiped his nose and said there wasn't a trash can nearby. So Ju Hook should throw it in his trash can. Ju Hook was furious, so he filed an anonymous complaint on the company website. My boss is a damn bastard and is pushing his work on me all week. Now he's wiping his nose and throwing the dirty paper at me. The protagonist hides the secret that nobody knows. The truth is that he is an ex-military man who was kicked out for being too violent. Now he tries to live a normal life and avoid breaking the bones of everyone in his path, while convincing himself not to destroy his boss. Juhuk's glasses emitet a strange alert. His brain has been synchronized with the equipment. These glasses are connected to his brain. If he stays without the glasses for more than 60 seconds, an electric shock will fry his head. Later, his boss came to him to give more ridiculous orders. Ju Hook fought to control himself. Then the glasses spoke in his head. Kim Ju Hook, 28 years old, he received a mission. Then right after the glasses, scanned the cursed superior and gave a complete information sheet. The new mission is to tell the target stop swearing. A penalty will be applied if he fails the mission. Time remaining 10 seconds. Juhuk paralysit. This was all very strange. The counter in his head was saying 4, 3, 2, 1. The protagonist didn't do the mission, so the penalty appeared in front of him. Minus 50% loss rate. He didn't understand what that meant, but opened his banking app to check something. Then he noticed that half his money was gone. Furious, he shouted loudly that this was madness. This caught the attention of everyone in the office. Everyone thought this was strange. This guy's always so quiet. His boss heard and asked if those words were for him. Then later, the two went to the company rest area. Choi Guang started poking Ju Hook and questioning if he lost his head. If suddenly his subordinate does strange things, he will have problems. Choi then said he hates people like Hu because just because they work out a little they must think they are big shots. Besides, it is annoying how Hu acts makes it look like he is sparing him and not as if he was scared like he should be. Hu was determined not to lose control, so he endured silently. But the girl from before appeared and asked if Ju Hook was an idiot. That took the protagonist by surprise. Then the girl said people don't need to endure everything silently. She took a voice recorder and showed the recording. Every threat Choi made to Hook and how he said he hated him just because he works out and has a strong body. Su Yun said Choi needs to apologize to Hook and change how he behaves from now on. The man's reaction was to advance on the girl and take the recorder from her hands. It was then that the monster came out of the cage. Ju Hook held his boss's arm and stopped him. Choi was furious, but Hook was calm. He said that this way Choi will hurt his arm. The system in his glasses alerted, hit a blow on Choi's throat. The man was uncontrolled and was gentle. By attacking Hu this way, created the perfect situation for him to fight back. Hyuk dodged the punch and gave a subtle caress on his throat. This threw him 3M back. Our boy just said that Croy only talks, so this will help him stay quiet longer. The girl from before got scared. She didn't expect them to start a fight. Hyuk told her, just pretend you are not seeing anything. The system warned in his glasses. The reward for the mission is 200% profit. When Hu looked at his account, his money increased 200%. Choi asked with a hoarse voice if it went crazy to hit his superior this way. Now the truly true truth was revealed to us. Ju Hook accepted all humiliation to keep his job and salary. But if now a system will give him money, he doesn't need to worry about anything else. Scared, Choi said he would show his secret fighting technique. He tried to hit Hook, but had no success. That was exciting for our boy. Since he was kicked out of the army, he hadn't fought. Easily, he immobilized Choi. His face became as ugly as his personality. Hugh calmed his boss and said it would end in seconds. His mission was only to put him to sleep a little. So, when he lost consciousness and fell face on the ground, the system warned that a new mission was completed. 500% profit. The excitement of earning so much money was electrifying. It was as if he discovered he had 1,000 bitcoins saved and just found out. Once when the protagonist was interviewed for this job, he was just an individual trying to restart his life and sought something ordinary like everyone else. Thus, he had no idea of the future that awaited him. As now that these mysterious missions have appeared, he completes the tasks and makes easy money where most of the time the protagonist only needs to do something trivial like playing a prank on someone or goofing off at work. He spent his last 3 days doing this and collected a total of 580 million wons. Not only that, but he earned enough to live well for the rest of his life. However, As nothing in life is easy, a drone approaches Kim and drops a box for him. His system says he has passed the probation period. Inside the box, Kim finds a ticket. His system alerts him that until now he was only in the tutorial and that from now on the real missions will arise. Moreover, in the next 7 days, he can earn up to 1 billion wons. But if he doesn't earn this amount within the stipulated period, he won't be able to advance to the next stage. And all the money earned until then will be revoked. Kim Joo-hook is caught off guard by this news. He wonders how he will make 1 billion in 7 days. On the ticket he received, there's a note stating that this ticket guarantees a loan of 100 million for whoever possesses it. With little information, the protagonist doesn't even know where to start. He thinks it would be good to know where these glasses came from and who is behind this, but he doesn't know where to look for such information. Amidst this, Kim sees his boss and greets him. He says he doesn't see Choi very often and asks him to come to his cubicle before leaving. Choi starts to sweat and thinks that he's been avoiding Kim Joo-hook since their last encounter. But now he is caught off guard and doesn't know what to do. Kim then approaches quickly, startling Choi. He tells Choi to answer his question without yelling and asks if he knows the origin of these glasses. Still in shock, Choi says he doesn't know. However, Kim calls him a liar. Desperate, Choi reaffirms that he doesn't know. Then the protagonist imagines that his boss really doesn't know this information, but asks if Choi has seen anyone with the same glasses. His superior says no, which sounds even stranger to the protagonist as he wonders why he was the only one chosen. His information is insufficient to draw any conclusions. However, he gets excited to know that he will leave work early today. His mission is to enjoy this extra time and have a little fun. He leaves and tells his boss to take care of everything in his absence. Choi tries to argue that he had plans for tonight, but Kim doesn't want to hear it and takes revenge for all the extra nights of work he had to do. Sometime later, the protagonist arrives at a location still under construction as directed by his glasses. In this, he asks if he's in the right place. His system alerts him that a game is about to start and other participants will join him. Kim then asks if there are others in the same situation as him. His system only tells him to go to the briefcase with money. Still confused, the protagonist obeys. When he opens the briefcase, he realizes that his system was not joking. Next, the system says that each participant must keep their briefcase and anyone who gets robbed will lose the game as well as the money. But Kim can only think about the amount and the time allotted for the game, which is 30 minutes, as he believes there is no way he can lose. But soon after, some guys with knives show up wanting to take his briefcase. These tough-looking guys think they're facing an inexperienced rookie. To them, taking the protagonist's briefcase will be an easy task. However, they only think this because they don't know Kim's true nature. Even so, they claim they don't want to spill anyone's blood. So, they demand that the protagonist hand over the briefcase before something bad happens. Kim, however, says he has no intention of doing that and tells them they could try to rob him if they want. With that, the criminals realize that the protagonist is bold, but they don't back down. On the contrary, they become even more excited to play. However, Kim is also excited and says that the only thing the criminals need to do is try to take his money. The guys think the protagonist is just a greedy lunatic who has lost his fear in the face of a large sum of money. However, Kim tells them they have no idea who they are up against. Hearing this makes the gang leader quite angry to the point of being the first to charge. But as soon as he attacks, Kim defends himself and praises him for his bravery. But he says that he is about to understand the situation he has gotten himself into. With that, Kim prepares to strike, and he hits the opponent with a slap, sending him flying away. The others see this and are left speechless. Kim, for his part, says that with such weak participants, it will be even easier to win this game. Two of the criminals decide to split up and surround the protagonist. Soon, Kim praises them for working as a team. For their part, the guys say they will defeat him, claiming that the protagonist is an arrogant guy. They then attack together, but Kim kicks the ground, raising a cloud of dust, confusing one of the criminals' sense of direction. The other gets angry and intends to take revenge. However, as soon as he attacks the protagonist with his knife, Kim easily dodges the blows, claiming that his enemy doesn't know how to handle a blade. His words make his opponent even angrier. Blinded by rage, he attacks and believes that the protagonist won't be able to escape this. However, Kim manages to immobilize his opponent, and with a single move, he breaks his blade, leaving him unarmed. The enemy is shocked to see this, and due to his distraction, he becomes an easy target. With a hammer blow to the head, the thug falls unconscious. Kim then says that they were unlucky to face a veteran of the armed forces, but he knows he still has to deal with the other thug since the other thug isn't attacking. Kim asks if he wants to talk. The thug is completely lost and doesn't know what to say. Kim then asks if the thug knows who created this game. His opponent says no, that he just received a device that put him in this game. The protagonist notices that his adversary is wearing a watch and not glasses like him, and wonders if that makes any difference. While he is lost in thoughts about this, his enemy thinks he could take advantage of this moment of distraction to win the game. However, Kim quickly approached and caught the thug by surprise. Instead of hitting the protagonist by surprise, it was the thug who met this unfortunate end, and with a single blow, he kissed the ground. But to the protagonist's surprise, the other thug calls his attention, saying that this is no joke, as there are 300 million at stake according to the rules. However, the thug's device says that he lost the game and that he lost his accumulated amount. Not only that, but his watch says that due to the defeat, he will be punished. Kim is left confused about what is happening for a second. The man in front of him begs for help. Meanwhile, his entire body has apparently been poisoned, and he falls to the ground shortly after. The protagonist realizes that this seems like some kind of injectable drug, and it was probably the device that administered the poison. He then deduces that his glasses also have this capability, which Kim doesn't think he is prepared for in this situation. However, soon after someone appears saying that once inside the game, there is no way to escape. A masked man says that participants enter this to get rich or leave losing everything they have. There is no other way to end this. They also collect the losing participants. Meanwhile, in the sky, drones observe everything, broadcasting the images to a monitoring center. After all, the participants are puppets in the hands of whoever created this game. Kim thinks that initially this game was easy, but he just realized that it won't be the same from now on. His system informs him that he has passed the initial phase and the real game begins now. Soon, new participants appear in front of the protagonist, but he doesn't see this as something bad because, in a way, Kim is having fun. And unlike the others, he is loving the game. In nature, there are predators that hunt other predators, like for example, the Siberian tiger, which targets wolves that live in high temperatures and hunt smaller prey. In the same way, there is the protagonist. Kim is a predator of hunters, and he is surrounded by a pack of hungry wolves. Even so, he can only see this situation as a way to level up and doesn't even consider the possibility that it could be dangerous. Not just for him, but for others as well. The important thing is the reward. But unlike the others, Kim is a former Special Forces agent, a combat specialist. Someone like that wouldn't be easily captured. Kim not only takes out his enemies, but also eliminates several competitors for the 300 million prize. Each time he defeats an opponent, there is one less in the competition, and the devices of the defeated alert what will happen to them upon losing the game, which further increases the despair of some. Kim realizes that unlike at the beginning, his opponents are more cornered and asks why they are not attacking him. Soon after, he says that if he is not attacked, he will take the initiative. One of the opponents, scared, tells the protagonist not to come closer and calls on all the others to act together and defeat the man with the briefcase. But this strategy doesn't work, and Kim bursts out laughing. The hunters who decided to gather to capture their common prey ended up falling to the hands of a tiger named Kim Joo-hook. The protagonist showed no mercy towards his enemies, leaving those who still stand extremely frightened. As Kim finishes off his enemies, those responsible for collecting the bodies wait for the fall of the others. The remaining participants end up giving up as they do not want to fight against someone so strong. Instead, they forfeit the prize and start to run. However, among the pack, there are still those who are braver who claim there is no reason to run since there is so much money at stake. Kim Joo-hook enjoys hearing this, as his desire is to play a little longer instead of finishing quickly. All the enemies attack at the same time with the intention of taking him down. But Kim says that the outcome of this match was decided from the very beginning as the drones capture everything and those responsible for the corpses watch the fight. Kim takes out all those who resisted, and in no time, he has his opponents at his feet. With that, the game ends and he is declared the winner. The protagonist then decides to leave the location claiming that he had a lot of fun. Then a woman who is watching him says that the protagonist is the type of participant who doesn't usually last long. A mysterious man accompanying her agrees and adds that those who think they are special tend to fall when seeking attention. He also says that the protagonist has no idea how dangerous this game is. However, for Kim, every day is the same. A life stuck in work and no free time to live. Every time he returns home after work, he can barely do anything due to the exhaustion he experienced during his day. However, today was different because after winning the match, he didn't go home, but instead rented a luxury suite for 20 million WS. He thinks that the money he would take a long time to earn working was made in just 4 days. That's why he decided to celebrate. His account is filled, and Kim thinks this is the life he has always dreamed of. The suite he rented comes with a truly luxurious room service, and he takes the opportunity to order the most expensive dish in the hotel. Kim tries the meat, which, by the way, he doesn't usually eat something so expensive in his daily life. and because of that, he ends up having an unusual reaction. The woman who served him asks if the food is to his liking, and the protagonist confirms, claiming it is quite tasty. However, the woman finds this strange. After all, she is not a legitimate employee, but rather an infiltrator who is there to observe the protagonist, just like she did earlier at the construction site. She removes her disguise in front of the protagonist, expecting a surprise reaction from him. However, the opposite happens, and the woman asks how he can be so calm in a situation like this. Kim reveals that he knew she was disguised from the beginning, and says he saw her following him from the construction site. Not only that, but Kim knows she is not alone. The mysterious man then appears saying that the protagonist has good perception and finds that quite interesting. Kim says he doesn't know why he is being followed, but he certainly knows they are dangerous. Furthermore, he claims to have several doubts he would like to clarify. The man asks if the protagonist is trying to extract information from him. Kim says that is exactly the case. Then the man says he would also like to ask the protagonist a few things. They chat for a bit, and the old man asks how the protagonist ended up on these missions. Kim explains that, like them, he received a device and has been carrying out missions ever since. The old man then asks why there is no device on Kim's arm. Upon hearing this, the protagonist realizes they do not know about his glasses and thinks it is better to keep it that way. The woman thinks that if the device is not on the wrists, it might be on the protagonist's ankle like a prisoner. Kim says it is now his turn to ask and questions whether there is a way to remove the device. The old man responds with another question, saying that if there were a scenario where the protagonist could put a price on freedom, he would ask what that value would be. For his part, the protagonist does not understand the meaning of the question. Then the old man says that for him, the value of freedom is 2 billion watts. He states that this is the amount to make the device disappear. Once Kim heard from the old man that the people behind the game are called operators. They created everything from the game, its rules, and even the devices. Rumors say they have connections to illegal products and sell them through the dark web, using that money to finance this macabre project. Moreover, they see the participants as puppets taking desperate people for money and putting them in situations from which they cannot escape. Once someone enters the game, there is no way out. Kim asks why the old man is speaking about this with such emphasis. The old man says he has encountered people like the protagonist before, and he asks Kim what is more important to him, money or freedom. The protagonist replies that the answer is obvious. He even intends to buy his freedom when he reaches the 10 billion mark. With this, the old man knows that Kim is greedy. Not only that, but he realizes that Kim is confident enough to believe he will win all the missions from now on. In this case, the old man proposes that Kim play a simple game right now. Kim understands that this would be a private match between them and asks if this is some kind of test. He says he is not the type to shy away from a challenge, and his system soon asks if he accepts to play. With this, Kim realizes that the old man has some kind of connection to the system of his glasses. By the way, the old man's name is Gun-Mo, and seeing Kim's reaction to the challenge, he asks him if something is wrong. The protagonist sees that the reward for winning this challenge is high. Thus, he feels even more motivated and says there is no problem at all. For his part, Gun-Mo claims to be looking forward to the match. The protagonist understands that once the match begins, he cannot leave until he finishes playing and is filled with doubts. But Gun says it is too late for that now, as the roulette has already started spinning. They are rolling dice, and whoever gets a higher number is the winner. This game can last several rounds, or can end in the first, depending on the combination. In any case, the woman accompanying Gu acts as the courier and offers chips to the players. The old man says that the white dice are rolled and revealed simultaneously, while the black dice can be revealed by lifting the cup after the bet. Then, Kim Joo-hook asks if this is a game of luck. Gun-Mo says yes. But based on how calm the protagonist is, he deduces that Kim thinks luck is on his side. Indeed, the protagonist thinks he is lucky. After all, his life has changed drastically for the better in recent days. He remembers that he was never very good in school, and he also never won anything playing the lottery. Luck was never on his side. However, everything changed suddenly. Kim made over 800 million in 3 days, and if that is not luck, he does not know what is. Seeing the young man's excitement, Gu asks if Kim is ready to start. The protagonist believes he can turn a moment of crisis into an opportunity, so he agrees to roll the dice. However, his die lands on the number 1, and he is surprised. Even the old man says that this is a very low number. Still, the protagonist believes it is not over yet, because everything depends on the second die that is yet to be revealed. For his part, the old man bets 100 million on his victory. Kim is surprised as this amount is quite high for someone who is only in the first round of the game. Moreover, if he loses this game, he will lose everything he has gained so far. However, he decides to keep betting. The courier reveals the second die, Anticipation builds among the players. Then it is revealed that the value of the second die is 3. Kim gets excited as he still has a chance to win. But when the next die is revealed, he notices it is another 1. Automatically, Kim goes into shock as he just lost 100 million wons. The old man says this is normal in a dice game, but claims this was just the first round. Kim says he may have lost now, but his luck will change in the next round. Despite believing this, with each round, Kim lost more money until he reached a total loss of 500 million. With that, the croupier announces that this is the last round of the game and asks them to roll their dice. Kim takes the lead, and this time has a higher value than his opponent. He feels hopeful and bets 300 million. However, the old man goes all-in and says that if Kim wins the game, he will keep everything that is his. The protagonist does not understand why someone who is winning would do such a thing. Therefore, he thinks the old man must be very confident in his victory and even imagines that the dice might be rigged in his favor. However, he finds it somewhat impossible for that to happen and decides to continue with the game. Gyun Mo gets excited and thinks that Kim is indeed the type of person who does not accept losing. However, he considers himself the same and calls himself the lucky white snake. The old man is a legendary gambler, a predator who usually does not lose. When the dice are revealed, Gyun Mo automatically wins. Thus, Kim Joo-hook lost a total of 880 million watts. With that, the old man says he had a lot of fun and leaves a card for the protagonist, saying that if he finds something more important than money, he should seek him out as he hopes to meet Kim again. The next day, a dinner takes place among the employees where Kim works, and the team leader claims to be happy to gather with his team. But while everyone seems to celebrate, Choi Guang notices strange behavior coming from the protagonist. As Kim's desperation is clear on his face, his superior thinks Kim is acting very strangely and wonders why. But he thinks it's better to stay quiet, as he does not want this to burden him. Then someone approaches the protagonist, saying that he is dining with his colleagues, but does not seem to feel well. This man is the company president, Becky Man, concerned about Kim. He asks what is wrong. For his part, the protagonist completely ignores the president, which makes Choi panic. After all, this is a great disrespect. Then Choi himself speaks up and tries to ease the situation. However, Becky Man says it's all right and understands that sometimes it's hard to talk about one's problems in front of others. Then he asks Kim to accompany him outside for a moment. When the two step out, the rest of the table comments on Kim's strange behavior and say that since he arrived to work in the morning, he has been completely off. One of the employees says that behaving like this in front of Becky Man is not good. After all, he tends to lose his temper when drunk. Sueon, however, says that the president is not drunk, yet so everything should end well. But her colleagues say that Becky Man is actually a good person when sober, but when he drinks, he becomes someone different, nicknamed Smiling Buddha. Meanwhile, outside, Bekdak Man confronts Kim and says that he does not know his place, then tells him to go back and enjoy the party like everyone else. He also says he does not understand what is wrong with this current generation, as he believes that young people today no longer know how to have fun. While listening to his boss ramble on, the protagonist can only think about the amount he lost and does not pay attention to anything else around him. Besides, he wonders if he will have to work like a slave for drunks like Becky Man for the rest of his life. Irritated, the president slaps Kim and asks if he is listening. He also says he will give 100,000 wons for every slap he lands on Kim, claiming that he should be grateful for this mental education. In the protagonist's mind, he wishes to retaliate by breaking the arm of the drunk in front of him. But his system has given him a new mission, asking him to behave like someone who has truly changed their mindset in that after taking a few hits. The protagonist claims that this served to open his eyes and thanks his boss for his wise words. Not only that, but he claims it is an honor to work alongside Becky Man and asks if he can teach him more often. Byackman enjoys hearing this and says that this is the spirit he wants to see in his employees. He then says that they should go back and drink a little more. For his part, the protagonist did not want to be acting, but his system assigned a mission to kidnap the president, which Kim is even excited to do. After all, he only thinks about the reward he will receive at the end of the task. Sometime later, Becky Man wakes up feeling somewhat disoriented until he realizes he is tied up and asks Kim what is happening. With a smile on his face, Kim says that the president has been kidnapped. Confused, Becky Man asks if this is some kind of prank. Kim tells his boss that he was wandering drunk in the streets until 4 in the morning, claiming he didn't want to go home. The protagonist claims that he did exactly what his boss wanted and could not leave him alone. Becky Man then asks to use his phone. With that, the protagonist says that he took a peek at his boss's phone while he was sleeping and found some very interesting things. Deeply irritated, Becky Man starts cursing the protagonist, stating that he is trash who doesn't know who he is dealing with. Kim, however, says that it is actually Becky Man who still doesn't understand who he is dealing with. He shows what he found on Becky Man's phone and asks who he is to call someone trash. Becky Man changes his approach to a softer one and asks how Kim discovered these things. The protagonist simply says that Beck wouldn't understand, but claims that strange things tend to happen in the world. Kim managed to hack his boss's phone with the help of his system and tells Beck that he is starting to understand the situation he is in. However, he claims that if he tries to contact the police, something interesting will happen. While fiddling with his boss's phone, Kim finds something else, a folder with compromising content about some female employees of the company. Becky Man knows exactly what is in there. Then, the protagonist asks what the president thinks of his female employees. In response, Beck says he sees the employees as obedient dogs to their master. He asserts that they didn't know their place and were acting arrogantly, precisely because they couldn't get far in life without dragging someone down. Beck believes he simply gave them a chance and states that everyone has a skeleton hidden in the closet. Irritated, Kim says that Beck is indeed trash without salvation. His boss says that they're not different. After all, the way he is being treated by Kim confirms that. For his part, Kim shuts down his abusive boss and says he will give him a 100,000 wons for every time he slaps him. Just as his boss said before, Kim says that Beck should be grateful for being mentally trained. Furious, Beck threatens Kim, claiming that he cannot touch a single hair on his head. But before he could say more, Kim lands a solid slap on him. With nothing to do, Beck falls to the ground and stays there. Soon, Kim approaches and asks if he thinks he is a superior being just because he has money. Desperate, Beck tries to negotiate with Kim. However, the protagonist claims that working hard and living a happy life is something difficult to achieve. But trash like Beck goes down another path, and that is why they think they have the right to belittle and look down on others. Kim says that his only wish is for Beck to know what injustice is at least once in his life. However, to Beck's surprise, a guy arrives at the scene. He says he found a target that needs to be saved, and his partner asks what is wrong with the tied-up man. For his part, Beck begs to be saved, claiming he was kidnapped by a man. The man who just arrived received the mission to rescue Beck from his system and claims he is there to help, but asks for patience to do his job. Kim then understands what is happening, but he appears to be very calm, which frightens his adversaries. However, before they could do anything about it, the protagonist already arrives with both feet in the door. He catches both opponents by surprise. In a matter of seconds, Kim defeats them, which crushes all of Beck's hopes of being rescued. The way the protagonist defeats his opponents makes Beck realize that escaping this situation will not be easy. But soon after someone cuts the rope that was binding him, the protagonist himself deliberately freed Beck. He says that now that he has saved him from danger, he would like to negotiate a salary increase. Then Kim claims that his salary will be increased 5-fold. Moreover, he also wants a promotion to a position with the least working hours in the company. However, Kim asserts that the most important thing is that from now on, Beck will be his pet and will do everything he is ordered to do. In addition to being treated as someone inferior to a human, just as he once viewed others far from there, in the city prison, a guard visits the cell of prisoner 3270. He also received the bracelet with the system. His mission is to let a first-degree criminal escape. Not only that, but he chose one of the worst inmates in the jail to release. The system itself warns that with the escape, a new game will begin. On a beautiful workday, Choi arrives at the company and notices strange activity. His colleagues say that Choi needs to see this. He approaches and is shocked by what he sees. From the other side, the protagonist is on a throne greeting everyone. Kim Joo-hook says that due to an order from the company president, he has had a change of position and taken on other tasks in the corporation. However, Choi wonders how Kim managed such an achievement. The protagonist is now the president's right-hand man and says he is eager to work in his new role. On the other hand, Kim remembers that because of the glasses, all his money is gone. He even made quite a bit of money, but lost everything he had, even the money he earned before these games. However, he thinks that if he had a ticket, he could win 500,000 in a single day. But the reason Kim is not happy about this is the fact that the countdown of his system is decreasing rapidly, and he is nowhere near reaching the goal of 1 billion. Moreover, if he fails, his fate will be sealed. The protagonist does not want to let that happen, but he does not have a ticket to use. Thus, any mission or game that appears, he cannot refuse. Back in the previous prison, the control center is monitoring the escort of some prisoners. A bus is transporting them, and a specific target is inside. At least, that is what they believe. For the one responsible for the security of the transport is the same officer who freed the dangerous prisoner. After taking control of the situation, he opens the prisoner's compartment and throws the keys to one of them, telling the guy to do whatever he wants, although he cannot escape no matter what he does. When the game starts, the hackers will likely take control of the security cameras and police radios. Then, the man tells the prisoners to flee as far as they can, even though in any case, they will never be able to escape. After all, this man's mission is to hunt down fleeing criminals. Desperate, the prisoners begin to free themselves in search of freedom. People like these tend to be desperate enough to face great dangers in order to achieve their goals. Inside the bus, the most dangerous prisoner also frees himself. The others see him as an ally in the escape. He heard the prisoners talking about money hidden under the floor and wants to go there first. For him, it does not matter if he has to turn Korea upside down as long as he finds his precious money. As the bus speeds along, a drone monitors it. Those hunting the prisoners are watching everything. One of them says they need to hurry before other hunters show up to join the chase, as he does not want to share his prey. For hours after the game starts, the hunter is chasing his targets and captures them with a harpoon, claiming that criminals do not deserve special treatment. He says that for a convicted criminal, their prey usually cries like little children. For the hunter, it is even good to have a large number of targets as the reward is greater, and for him, it is more advantageous to capture one at a time than to try to attack them all together. However, someone different from his partner appears and says that brilliant minds think alike, as he claims. He also captures his targets one at a time. This is one of the thugs from the bus who captured the hunter's partner and is now after the other. The hunter is caught off guard and tries to calm the criminal. However, he is not successful in this task. Sometime later, the criminal tells his leader that he took care of the threats, but one of his colleagues ended up being taken down. He asks how many people are out there hunting them. In turn, the leader of the criminal says he has no idea and doesn't care about it either. He claims he didn't bother to count how many hunters he eliminated. He also mentions that it's been a while since he had this much fun, but now he wants to find the money that is buried before he gets interrupted again. And he says that those who don't want to share the same fate as the hunters should hurry. His ally says that these hunters are members of some gang, but he couldn't find out which organization they belong to. However, he discovered that they have these watches in common. He also found out that bounties have been placed on the heads of the fugitive prisoners. The leader then becomes curious to know what the bounty is for him. His ally then reveals that the amount is 500 million watts. With that, the big guy celebrates, claiming that this has always been his dream. His ally thinks that this guy must be crazy, especially since 5 of the fugitive prisoners have already perished. One of the diggers says they have already found a bit of buried money. 3 buckets containing 500 million each, and there are still 3 more to go. With that, the thug thinks the total is 3 billion, a much larger amount than he expected, and it could be even bigger if he didn't have to share this sum with the others. He thinks that with this money he could start over, but for that he will have to leave the others behind. Meanwhile, a hunter watches everything from afar and discovers that the prisoners are digging up money. But he also realizes that they are more dangerous than he imagined. His partner asks if they are really going to continue. The hunter says yes. After all, the reward for this task is great and cannot be ignored. There are 3 of them, and one of the hunters feels bad about having to hunt humans for money. However, his colleague says that criminals like these are not human, and the only thing you should worry about is the amount each one is worth. After that, he says they need to come up with a plan to catch them all. The leader of the group of hunters says that the ideal would be to keep their distance and hit them from afar so they can stay safe. Besides, this would help them take the targets one at a time. However, when he least expected it, the hunter is surprised. He gets a huge scare, thinking it's a criminal. However, the person approaching says they can lower their guard now. Kim Joo-hook joins the hunt and claims to be just an office worker and asks if they're also participating in the game because he has a good plan and would like to know if they're interested in hearing it. Still somewhat startled, the hunters remain defensive. They say they don't know the protagonist. Therefore, they warn him to keep his distance. One of the hunters says the protagonist could very well be an enemy, so he will count to 3 for him to back off, otherwise he will shoot. Even so, Kim insists that he has a good method to share. But as soon as the count reaches 3, the hunter fires. For his part, the protagonist manages to deflect the arrow that was shot at him, which leaves the hunters quite surprised. Kim says the hunter's mistake was announcing when he was going to shoot and claims that this shows amateurism on their part. He also says that for now, he is being nice and asks if they have any other problems to resolve. The accused hunters claim they do not. In that case, Kim says they can start the operation. On the other side, the fugitives are still digging. Some of them don't like doing this because they are working hard because their leader forgot the exact spot where he buried the money. But soon after, they're surprised by an unexpected visit. Not only that, but the criminals ask why these 3 men appeared empty-handed. Trembling with fear, the leader of the hunter simply tells his colleagues to run. Then they start to run as they attract the attention of the enemies. The hunters actually served as bait to lure some criminals away from the others. Obviously, All of this was the protagonist's plan, who arranged a meeting place with them. But upon arriving there, the hunters do not find Kim. They become scared, as that was the plan until then. However, before they could run, the thugs surround them. With shovels in hand, the fugitives say they are prepared with the perfect tools to deal with this situation. Without further ado, they charge into the attack, but an axe is thrown in the direction of one of the enemies. Irritated, he asks who threw that. At that moment, the protagonist appears and says that his target doesn't need to know who he is. Kim throws a lit torch into the field surrounding the house and says that now no one will be able to escape his sight. Therefore, Kim believes that getting rid of them will guarantee him easy money. The hunters understand that they are also targets of Kim and ask what happened to their plan. Kim doesn't want to hear about it, and his unusual attitude even scares dangerous criminals. Thanks to this, they become easy prey. The protagonist hits his first target and sarcastically says that the others can start to panic. The fugitives decide to band together and attack all at once. For the protagonist, this is even an advantage because he uses the confusion of his enemies against them. Kim takes them down mercilessly and even takes the enemy's weapons to use against them. Seeing his allies fall before his eyes, one of them becomes terrified. However, Kim has no intention of sparing anyone. After disarming the last target, he goes in for hand-to-hand combat. With just one blow, the protagonist takes his opponent to the ground. Seeing this leaves the other hunters in shock. They believe that in a game like this, a player has to choose between money and their own life. But they realize that Kim is different, calling him the ultimate hunter. A little later, the fugitive responsible for the money search appears and asks what happened to the others. He sees the protagonist and asks if he was the one who took down his allies. Kim asks if the target in front of him is seeking revenge. The fugitive says no and claims to be there only to finish the job that Kim couldn't complete. He also says that the protagonist is an amateur who is afraid to get his hands dirty with blood. After that, he asks if the protagonist is ready to have his body pierced. Kim replies that in fact he has already been injured several times, which his opponent finds hilarious. Then the enemy says he will inflict permanent injuries on Kim, but the protagonist doesn't want to make it easy for him and dodges the attacks. He tries to be faster than the enemy, otherwise he knows he will be hit. What the protagonist didn't expect is that his enemy is ambidextrous and can attack from both sides. So, he asks for a moment before continuing. His opponent agrees and asks if the protagonist wants to borrow one of his knives. Kim says no as he is looking for something different. He goes to the gardening tools and is grateful that this property has exactly what he needs. His opponent asks if the protagonist is really going to fight with that. With 2 garden sickles in hand, Kim says yes as he feels like a praying mantis with him. Then he asks if his opponent is ready to start again. In his thoughts, the criminal says that in his approaches, whenever he shows his knife, his targets change their attitude and become afraid. Regardless of size or confidence, a blade is enough to scare them, especially when he goes into action. The thug even enjoys this and feels satisfaction in seeing a situation like this. However, this time his target is not afraid at all. The protagonist's face shows joy in being in such a fight, which confuses his enemy. In any case, Kim begins to attack now that he is armed. His opponent tries to defend himself as best he can, but realizes that now instead of hunting, he is being hunted, which makes him very angry. So, he decides to threaten the protagonist. However, instead of feeling fear, Kim finds the situation amusing, making his enemy even more furious and confused by such behavior until he starts to realize that there's only one reason to be treated this way and concludes that probably his opponent sees him as just a simple insect. The enemy's rage only increases with this conclusion as he wants to prove to the protagonist that he is not insignificant. However, even becoming more aggressive, Kim does not see his opponent as a real threat and scoffs at him whenever he can. Not only that, but he goes on the attack this time with the intention of ending this fight. After defeating his enemy, Kim says that he didn't know his proper place until he faced an equal opponent. Now Kim says that there is only one enemy left to defeat. He heads toward his target along with the other hunters until the leader of the hunters asks if they can leave now. Kim asks why they want to go. The hunter says that the remaining criminal is brutal and they believe they cannot handle someone like that. Besides, they didn't even intend to go after this guy initially as they were going to be content with just the smaller targets. Soon after, they're surprised as the main target appears and understands that he is the subject of the hunters. Then he says that introductions will not be necessary. Immediately, the protagonist turns and lands a punch on the enemy. However, this did not have the expected effect, forcing Kim to attack again. His enemy remains standing and finds the situation quite interesting. The protagonist says he is facing someone very resilient. In a way, Both begin to enjoy this and see a worthy opponent in each other. It doesn't take long for them to start facing off. Kim doesn't waste any time and attacks with everything he has, but he is not facing just any adversary. He even manages to land a few hits. However, his enemy takes them and still remains standing. Not only that, but he also retaliates. This makes the protagonist wonder how someone can withstand so many consecutive attacks and still keep fighting. Kim has never faced anyone this strong before and is not used to it. Even so, he does not give up. However, his adversary begins to enjoy the fight and makes it harder for the protagonist to act. He realizes that winning this fight will be more difficult than he imagined, as the brute in front of him does not seem to be tired. The enemy advances towards the protagonist and manages to hold him, breaking his stance. Kim feels the pain of the blow and also becomes vulnerable. After all, his enemy has captured him. The big guy tries to completely immobilize the protagonist and tells Kim that the difference in strength between them is noticeable. However, Kim says it is common knowledge that there are people who overcome this type of strength with knowledge. For the superhuman strength that humans exert in extreme situations can surpass the brute force of some opponents. After Kim overcomes his adversary's strength, he says he is special and therefore will win. He claims that he usually holds back from using all his strength in combat, but on occasions like this, he makes an exception. With that, he throws his enemy to the ground, telling him not to get up through the big guy's fall. Kim completes the mission and earns the bonus for the victory. He says that in the end, his muscles win again. The game is over, and the protagonist made a good amount of money. This makes him remember his old times. On the other hand, the other hunters who watch the fight are even more horrified by Kim's performance until the leader of the hunters has an idea to avoid a loss. He suggests to his group to go to the money unearthed from the fugitives and divide it among themselves. Then they tell Kim that they will withdraw to deal with the rest of the situation and say goodbye. However, the protagonist asks what they are talking about. But before he can hear an explanation, Kim is hit by a tranquilizer dart. Not just him, but the other hunters as well. The others fall to the ground, but Kim manages to resist. The one who fired the shots approaches and says he is surprised that the protagonist is still standing. Kim cannot identify him, so he asks who that man is. The mysterious man is not alone. He says that Kim is quite curious and mentions that he will find his answers soon. Kim then falls to the ground as the dart finally takes effect. The masked man says that from now on things will only get better and he is looking forward to it. For his part, the protagonist hardly knows what awaits him. In a place completely on fire, a boy tries to escape the flames until in the midst of the escape, someone approaches him asking why he is fleeing alone. The boy then becomes scared and sad until shortly after the protagonist wakes up, for he was just having a nightmare. He gets up and realizes he is in his bed at home, but he doesn't quite remember what happened. The last thing he recalls is defeating the escaped prisoner and being hit by a dart fired by a mysterious masked man. Kim thinks that this masked man can only be with the game organization. Then he hears the sound of the TV. On the news, it is announced that an accident destroyed a bus transporting prisoners and everyone perished in the fire. The protagonist knows well that this is not what happened, but realizes that this is an attempt to cover up traces. In any case, he decides to check his bank balance and notes the amount of 1,700,000, which means nothing has changed. Then he checks the status of his mission and notes that the goal of reaching 1 billion in 7 days has been achieved, which means everything is going according to plan. But when he runs his hand over his neck, he notices something different. His system alerts him that a device with a bomb has been implanted in him, and that Kim will have to complete 5 chain missions within the stipulated time. Otherwise, the device will be activated and the bomb will explode. Meanwhile, Choi is in the building of the company where he works. He was assigned to get coffee every day for Kim and is not enjoying it at all. But in the midst of his thoughts, he notices someone approaching. Kim arrives running and shouts for Choi to get out of the way. Like a jet, Kim passes by Choi, causing him to spill the coffee on the floor. Impressed, Choi thinks that Kim must have something urgent to resolve. Already in the building, Yuzu Yen is working normally until the protagonist arrives at her desk completely agitated, which leaves the girl quite startled. She asks what is happening. Kim received a mission from his system to contact Yu Yen, so he went after her. Even so, Sueon asks what is so important that he arrived so quickly. The protagonist needs to keep her within approximately 3 m. So, he uses his new position to ask Su Yen for help with work. However, he knows he has to be convincing enough, otherwise he won't be able to persuade her. He then says that instead of working, he would like Swan to talk to him about her concerns, and he will let Choi handle all the work in her place. Choi appears, and Kim says the timing couldn't be more perfect. Then he says he will help with everything that is requested. Even against his will, Choi agrees. Kim also mentions that regarding all the expenses during his colleague's break, They will be paid with the company president's corporate card. But for that, Soo-yin will have to agree to go with him. Thus, she doesn't even consider refusing. Then they both leave and go to a park. Soon after, they go bowling and even catch a movie. Meanwhile, Kim knows he has to keep Soo-yin close until the deadline, but he just realized that this might look like a date. In any case, he decides to take her to dinner at an expensive restaurant. Soo-yin says she had a lot of fun during the day and hasn't had such fun since her school days. She thinks she is working hard to live her life, but sometimes feels quite lost. But thanks to her colleague, she feels good now, even though she knows he did this only because of work. Although she is a bit tipsy, she makes a point of thanking Kim for what he did for her. For his part, the protagonist system asks him to make Soo-yin laugh, and he decides to imitate a sea lion using utensils as fake teeth. At first, Soo-yeon finds this quite strange, but she can't help it and starts to laugh. With that, Kim completed another task, and he's starting to think that this mission will be easy to complete despite the risk. Next, the waiter approaches with a special order, saying that on behalf of the restaurant, he has a gift. As soon as he reveals the gift, Kim realizes it is a device, and he is shocked as he didn't expect this. His system asks him to install the watch on his colleague, as this is part of the mission. Soo-yin has no idea what is happening. As for her, this is just a simple gift from the restaurant. For his part, Kim asks the waiter who he is. With a serious look, the waiter simply tells the protagonist to behave, or there will be consequences. Kim then understands that this is not a common situation and will have to keep playing. His colleague asks if something is wrong. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks that this game is a dilemma where human lives are treated like toys. In any case, he tells Soo-yin that there is nothing wrong, and he picks up the watch to take a look. Sometime later, Kim takes her home. Soo-yin ended up falling asleep after a busy day. He then thinks he can take advantage of this to put the watch on her and quickly finish his mission. After all, the only thing that truly matters in this world is money. Besides, he considers his own life more important than that of others. However, he wonders why he is hesitating, until a voice speaks to the protagonist and says it will not tell anyone what he is about to do. The voice says that to survive, it is necessary to do things like this. The masked man from before says he knows everything about Kim, claiming that he is special. But despite that, he is just like the other participants, a greedy capitalist. He also says that controlling humans is easy. And the reason for this is that people are easier to buy than some animals. For his part, the protagonist asks if the voice on the other side really thinks it has control over him. He says he needs to tell a secret to the masked man. First, he claims to be quite furious about the situation he has been placed in, and he reveals that when he gets angry, he tends to turn the world around him upside down. The voice asks what Kim is trying to do. In turn, the protagonist tries to rip out the device implanted in his neck. Not only that, but with a simple knife, he manages to remove the device, claiming that he will not be manipulated for money. He also says that in fact, it is he who is using the system to his advantage, not the other way around. The voice on the other end does not back down and asks how far the protagonist thinks he will get. Soon after, drones approach where Kim is. Not only that, but they are armed and they begin to set fire around his house. The voice says that 5 people living nearby are now in danger. Therefore, Kim must save the 5 people from the fire or protect his coworker. As a mysterious man has placed a bounty on Soo-yan's head and spread it to all the players in the region, claiming that the fact that Kim wants to protect her will be put to the test, and he will have to keep Soo-yin safe from the other participants. Then he claims it will be fun to see the protagonist act during this mission. The masked man puts the protagonist in a moral dilemma and says he must hurry his decision. In turn, Kim thinks it is better to try to call emergency services. But he sees that his phone has been hacked, and the masked man claims that he will not be able to call anyone because he has everything under control in his hands and no authority will show up to help him. In this case, the protagonist claims he only has one solution. He starts shouting intensely the word fire in hopes that everyone around will hear in time to run. His neighbors hear the screams and indeed see the fire nearby. Even Swan, who is sleeping, wakes up. Kim, however, covers her with a blanket and pulls Soo-yin wrapped up out of the building. After they are outside, he says that everything will be okay. Meanwhile, the neighbors try to call emergency services, but no one can use their phones. Kim tells his co-worker to stay there and keep covered until he returns. She asks where the protagonist is going in such a dangerous situation. Kim replies that as a child, he had to flee from a fire to survive, but being so scared at the time, he could not save anyone but himself. Therefore, from that day on, he decided he would never leave innocent people in danger again. With that, he runs towards the fire to rescue the others. Soo-yin, still scared, thinks it is madness to go back into a burning building. Some curious people start to approach, and some even say they're lucky not to live in that building. Not only that, but instead of helping, they start filming the fire to post on their social media. With nothing else to do, they decided to try to capitalize on the panic of others. After all, they know very well that the despair of some is converted into entertainment for others. However, amidst these people, a hero emerges. The protagonist did the impossible, carrying people out of the building when no one else decided to help. After bringing out 4 people at once, he says that they both inhaled a lot of smoke and need medical attention. Swan asks where he is going. The protagonist replies that there is still one resident left inside, and he needs to save them. However, the masked man warns that a player is approaching Su Yan, and if Kim leaves her now, he may not find her alive again. At this crossroads, Kim remembers his past. Then, he decides to run as fast as he can to save the person in danger. He has less than a minute to do this and claims he will accomplish the task, contradicting the masked man. Shortly after, Kim finds the last survivor lying on the floor of their apartment. But the masked man says that he has been breaking the rules of the game and therefore will have to face penalties. Thus, if he saves this person, he will deduct $1 billion from Kim's account. Or he can simply leave without saving this person and keep his current money. Outside, Swan is worried about her colleague until someone approaches and addresses her, asking if she is the person who lives at Haru Village number 204. Swan asks if this man knows her. He replies that yes, and that he has been looking for her. After that, he reveals he has a knife and tells Swan to follow him without drawing attention. The girl becomes a little scared, but before the attacker could drag her away, someone approaches and scares him. The protagonist orders the aggressor to put the knife on the ground, stating that if he touches the girl, he will regret it. In turn, the aggressor claims that the reward of $300 million is his, and he won't let another participant take it as he arrived first. He then tries to stab the girl with a knife, but the protagonist throws a shoe in his direction, stopping him. Soo-Yun is so scared that she falls to the ground. Meanwhile, the aggressor says it's too late to help her. However, Kim runs towards her and ends up taking a stab in place of the girl. As he approaches the thug, he tells him he warned him not to do that. Even so, the enemy refuses to back down. Then, the protagonist headbutts him, causing the aggressor to pass out and fall to the ground. For his part, the protagonist starts to feel unwell as he inhaled too much smoke and also falls to the ground unconscious. Swan is worried about her colleague and tries to get him to regain consciousness. However, a man named Jin Yong Kyle approaches and asks if he should take the target or handle the situation right there. Startled, Soo-Yin has no idea what is happening. But for now, she won't get help. After all, the protagonist is unconscious on the ground. Upon hearing a commotion, Kim wonders if this is another nightmare until he realizes it's the voice of a young person and notes that he is not dreaming. On the other side of the room he is in, a boy tells a man not to come near him. The same man from before tells the boy to stop screaming and stay still. Kim then quickly approaches and tries to strike the unknown man, but the man manages to block the protagonist's punch. Even so, Kim tells the stranger to stay away from the boy until next Gyun Nemo appears armed and tells them to stop this commotion immediately. Kim recognizes Gyun Nemo from before, but armed. The old man says that acting recklessly is the same as digging your own grave. Kim realizes that the boy is terrified and, by the way, also has a device on his wrist. He didn't know that even children were being recruited for the game, which makes him furious. For his part, Ganamo tells Kim not to get involved, but the protagonist insists that they leave the boy alone. Then Gu asks why. After waking up in an unknown place, he wants to save a boy he has never seen before. Kim says the reason is quite simple. The boy is asking for help. And there's also the fact that they both seem to be criminals. With that, Gyun Nemo says that as a criminal, he will perform a non-peaceful act. The protagonist tries to protect the boy standing in front of him. But when Du shot, only water came out of his gun. The boy starts laughing at the situation, saying that Kim fell for the prank. After that, Kim lifts the boy up high and realizes that he is on the side of the thugs. In this case, he intends to teach him a good lesson about life. So he starts shaking the boy until he begs him to stop. Soon after, Gyun says he will explain everything calmly. His colleague says that Kim is better than they imagine. For his part, the protagonist asks who they are. The old man says that this was just a test and that this child is not in real danger. Moreover, he says he is part of the liberation group. After serving coffee to Kim, he says there is a lot to talk about, so he will have to summarize. Gyun says that last night, they found him unconscious along with a girl. She was taken to the hospital, but due to the shock, she doesn't remember exactly what happened. He also says that it was his colleague Jin Yong Chil who saved them. Now Go asks if the protagonist has any more questions. Kim thinks the old man is telling the truth and thanks him for the help, but says that Gyun Nemo wouldn't do something like this without having a reason in mind. Gu says that Kim gained notoriety by becoming a ranked player and his assets have exceeded 2 billion WS. However, he asks how long Kim thinks this will last. Gu says that when Kim earns more money and his ranking rises, he could become a target for other forces or other rankers. Unlike this time in the future, there may be things he cannot resolve alone. The protagonist thinks this is true and that Su Yun was in danger because of him, and this could happen again. Gu then says he has a proposal. He tells Kim to join his group, and if he accepts, he will return the 800 million he won from him last time. The old man claims that he and Kim have the same goal and need to ally. Kim is caught off guard by this proposal and thinks there must be a catch. Guess that is not the case. He claims that everyone who joins his group earns 400 million wons and says that if Kim joins, he will give him the other half later. He believes that Kim will not stop playing regardless of the situation, but he gives him some time to think about his answer. Sometime later, Kim thinks it doesn't seem real that he has 1,700,000,000 in his account, not to mention what he still has to receive. His system claims that there is a box heading towards Kim, and he has an unread message. In the message, the masked figure says he likes Kim and will not take the recent events personally. Thus, he hopes Kim enjoys his gift. Kim is outraged by this attitude from the unknown person, especially after everything that has happened. He thinks it is completely normal for his money to disappear at any moment, and that it is also impossible to withdraw large sums of money due to the system's control. Therefore, he wants to experience some of this money before it disappears again. With that, he decides to eat an expensive sushi. As he savors the food, Kim is amazed by the taste. He is not used to eating something so good, so every time he tries to make the most of it, he thinks he saw something like this on TV some time ago. A guy who won the lottery revealed in an interview that the thing he liked most about his new life was savoring foods that were previously inaccessible. Moreover, with the newly acquired amount, he claimed that his life became much easier. Thinking about this, Kim believes he should do the same and make the most of the rich life. 4 days later, a new gaming location was designated and participants were called to join the match. Among them is Kim Joo-hook. But unlike the others, he is the only one who is radiant with joy. His happy face starts to annoy the others. In his thoughts, Kim says that after the match, he should look for an apartment with a nice view until someone says he is late. The boy from before calls the protagonist master and tells Kim to take care of him. Kim recognizes the boy. He just didn't know he was an active member of the Liberation Group. He questions the boy's age, and the boy replies that he is 15 years old. The protagonist thinks that instead of playing a game like this, the boy should be in school, but instead he will have to form a team with him to defeat the other participants. The protagonist's system alerts about the formation of teams. He then realizes that the old man played dirty because he thought that in fact young Chio would be responsible for this task. In any case, the boy says that the team is counting on them. So, he wants to know if the protagonist is really strong enough to complete the mission. Kim does not like being questioned by a kid, but the boy persists and says that he makes a grim face when he is dissatisfied. Irritated, Kim tells the boy that he does not like him. However, the boy starts to tremble and says that this time he really needs to win. In any case, Kim tells the boy to stay in the back and follow him until the end of the mission. He assures the boy that he is strong enough to protect the child. The participants wait for the start of the challenge outside, until over the loudspeaker, it is announced that their mission is to protect the king. For this, they need to form 4 teams where one member of the team will be the king and the others will protect him. The boy realizes that he has been chosen to be the king and his team didn't even get to decide that on their own. Kim realizes that this actually makes his job easier, as protecting the boy was indeed his initial decision. However, he knows that in a game like this, one mistake can cost someone's life. Being the only group with a boy, the protagonist team automatically becomes the main target of the others. The boy also realizes this and knows that he has now become the main target of everyone else's gaze. The countdown ends and the game begins. Soon after, the others rush towards the boy. Frightened, he can barely move and just closes his eyes, trying to protect himself. But when he opens his eyes, he realizes that Kim has lifted him and taken him out of the danger zone. Sarcastically, the opponents praise the protagonist's speed. However, they say that if he keeps just protecting the boy, he won't be able to attack, and it will only be a matter of time before he loses. They even ask how long the protagonist can keep playing the role of a horse. In a game of hunter and prey like this, there is no option but to win or lose. Frightened, the boy pulls the protagonist's hair and doesn't know what to do anymore. Contrary to expectations, Kim gets excited about this game. He even imagines himself as an Azura. However, in the eyes of his opponents, he and the boy are acting like fools. The guys want to resolve this quickly until one of them notices that a pair isn't moving and asks why. They realize that these two seem to be twins, and the fact that they aren't attacking the weaker group makes them suspicious. Then the bullies start confronting the twins, saying they might even change their minds about who should be the first king to fall. Fortunately for the protagonist, someone appears to divert their attention. With that, he thinks he needs to make the most of this chance. However, the boy constantly distracts the protagonist. Noticing this, an opponent imagines he can catch the protagonist off guard and take down the king. Meanwhile, Kim tells the boy to strengthen his legs so he can stand. The boy doesn't understand what he is saying, but soon after he notices the approach of the enemies. Kim then throws the boy into the air like a cheerleader. Then he does the splits and hits both enemies at once. Not only that, but he manages to catch the boy before he hits the ground. However, having been surprised by this crazy strategy, the boy is shocked by what just happened. Kim puts him on the ground and tells him to wait until he finishes dealing with the others. But in the boy's mind, he wonders who this person in front of him really is. In the midst of this, they both hear screams and they realize that on the other side, one of the twins has made his first hunt while his prey screams in pain and begs to be freed. The hunter says there's no reason to do that as he is having a lot of fun. In any case, he ends up releasing the opponent's face, but only after causing quite a bit of damage. His brother doesn't fall behind. He also caught a prey and says that now his hunt no longer has a huge nose. Irritated, the opponent swears revenge, but his words don't stop him from receiving a precise knee strike. With that, he falls to the ground fast asleep. Even for Kim, seeing this was a bit surprising. Now only two teams are left, his and the cruel twins. However, the announcer announces the end of the first game and says that the next one will start soon in the gym. At the location of the next trial, the protagonist asks if the boy is okay to continue. Even scared, the boy says yes. Upon hearing this, Kim wonders why a cowardly boy would go so far. Then the game host introduces himself and says he is finally in front of his puppets. Kim, however, realizes he is facing another costumed clown. The host congratulates them for passing the first stage and claims they finished earlier than expected. Even so, he will prepare the next game. Then he explains that the next game is a 2 against 2 with random cards. He also says that the rules are simple. Each turn, a team will receive cards with body parts. In the attack turn, they can attack the body part drawn on the card. Otherwise, they will receive an attack on the body part drawn on the card. The rule of protecting the king remains until only one team is left. Moreover, the king can give any order to his team member, even to take a hit in his place. The king's words are absolute, and anyone who disobeys will be considered to have broken the rules and will go bankrupt immediately. With the necessary explanations given, the host starts the game. For his part, Kim realizes that this is not good. He thinks this game becomes even more dangerous against these two opponents. Kim suggests stopping the game before it starts. However, the boy says that's not possible. Then the protagonist asks why he insists so much on continuing to play. The boy simply says that he is the king and his word is absolute. It doesn't take long for the protagonist to realize that this was a terrible idea. The protagonist sees no sense in continuing with this game and tries to spare the boy from it, claiming in fact that he can use his title as king to avoid a worse evil. However, the boy only thinks about victory as he doesn't believe there is any alternative other than winning. Kim says he doesn't know the burden the boy is carrying. However, he asks why he acts as if the world is about to collapse. The boy then reveals that he is doing this for his sister. The one who should have been his father went to buy cigarettes and left his children behind with a huge debt. Soon the boy's sister took on a responsibility that wasn't hers. She told her brother Suho that if he could work harder, he could pay off the debt soon and their problems would end. Since always little Suho heard these words, and just the fact that his older sister was always smiling made the end of their debt, and problems never come. Moreover, Suho's sister is missing, and he believes that if he can pay off the debt, he could have her back. That's why he can't stop playing now. After hearing this, Kim claims that children shouldn't take care of adults. Then he says that as an adult, he doesn't need to take orders from a boy. Anyway, Kim agrees to continue with the game. With both teams on the field, the host starts the match. The opposing team begins to attack, and the card says for the twin to strike his opponent in the torso. The happy face of the twin shows how much he is enjoying this. Kim knew it wouldn't be easy. Not only that, but he feels the force of the blow, for even his internal organs felt the shock when he was hit. In the first round, the protagonist is aware of what is to come. Then the host says it's Team 2's turn to attack. The card that the protagonist draws isn't very good. He then thinks that his bad luck decided to show up just at a moment like this. Unlike him, his opponent draws the best cards. Soon, the opposing team gains the advantage, and the protagonist gets beaten more with each round. However, the opponent starts to notice something strange. He realizes that despite this, the protagonist shows no fear. On the contrary, Kim in a way gets excited about the situation. His brother approaches and asks if the twin is really attacking with everything. The host says that Team 1 has swapped players, and now he will reveal the next card. For his part, the twin who will attack says that the protagonist might be pretending to be fine, but claims that it won't last long. In Kim's mind, he thinks he has taken enough hits and probably won't last much longer if it continues like this. Until then, the boy asks for a substitution, which surprises Kim. He tries to convince the boy not to do it, but Suho is the king and asserts that this is an order. Suho claims to know what he is doing and says he will stay on defense from now on, then tells Kim to take care of the attack. The opponent says that the boy has probably never been hit for real before. Then he claims that he will teach him how painful a real hit can be. With that, he lands an E strike as the card instructed. Immediately, Suho falls to the ground, barely able to move. On his turn to attack, his team only gains the right to give a flick on the opponent's forehead. Soon, the boy thinks that luck is not on his side. However, Kim disagrees and says that this is not a bad card and celebrates that it is his turn to attack. He also says that only those who have never been hit by such a blow scoff at this card. His opponent thinks the protagonist is bluffing, but he changes his mind the moment he is hit. Kim celebrates for finally being able to attack. Even Suho is surprised by what he saw. After being hit, the opponent wonders how the protagonist has such attacking power. Besides, this is the first time he has attacked. Then Kim attacks again, this time with a punch. Right after he makes a new attack, this time just with the tip of his thumb. However, that doesn't mean the pain was less. On the contrary, his opponent asked his brother to substitute him. But since his brother is the king, he chooses to stay where he is and leaves his twin on the front line. For his part, Suho thinks that his opponents see him as weak. After all, he is just a child. However, he is determined to endure until the end no matter what happens. Since if he is right in his deductions, this is the only way to win. It is not the absence of fear that motivates him, but rather the opposite. Even so, he thinks it took a lot of courage to be hit in place of someone else, even though it hurt quite a bit. In any case, Suho is determined to win this game. On the other side, his opponent is furious. After all, the game has turned and he is getting beaten. For his part, the protagonist is loving this. Once again, he attacks and lands a right hook on the opponent. What threw him to the other side of the arena and even hit his brother on impact of the rabbits with a single strike. The protagonist asks if this by any chance is against the rules. In response, the host says no and furthermore congratulates him on his victory. After that, Suho celebrates the win. Kim asks if when he said he wanted to test something, this was what he had in mind. Suho replies that he had a hunch that if the king continued to play a defensive role, the attack card would be more effective. And in the end, he was right. He says that the king who orders the sacrifice will end up with no subjects. But by doing the opposite, he wins the battle. With that, the protagonist congratulates the boy's role. But so who raises a point? He says the game is not over yet, as they have not received their rewards. The host confirms and says that the final round is about to begin. He also says that now they will no longer have teams and must play individually for victory. He explains that the game consists of a rebellion, where the king must contain the turmoil of his subject. So since they are the last two remaining, they will play against each other. Kim states he is surprised by this outcome, as he did not want to fight the boy. Unlike before, Suho also does not want to play. He has formed enough bonds with Kim that he does not want to fight against him, as in the end, only one will survive. But soon after Kim slaps the boy, he tells the boy to stop the nonsense and face reality, because from now on they are adversaries and whoever falters will perish. Moreover, the protagonist claims he is not such a good person. The host says the game continues until one of the players perishes or gives up, and the king must receive the same number of attacks he ordered his subject to receive before. Suho does not feel well having to play against Kim. Moreover, he believes it is impossible to defeat him in a fight, even if he had a blade or something like that. Even if he gives up playing, he does not know what comes next. So he feels lost. Kim notices the boy's excitement and tells him to think of the most important person to him. He knows the boy has someone to fight for, so he tells him to use that as motivation and not to worry about the rest. He also says that it does not matter how tired or hesitant the boy is, as the one who needs him is waiting for him. Therefore, he should hurry to find her, otherwise he will lose the only person left from his family. Suho thinks about it and realizes that these words make sense. This then serves as motivation for him to fight. Kim says his pride would be hurt if he had to fight against the child, so he says he will not attack. Thus, if the boy manages to hit him just once, he would give up and grant him the victory. Suho asks if the protagonist is serious. Kim says yes and tells the boy to go all out. He knows very well that in a cruel world like this, there is no way to achieve your goals just with willpower or desperation. In the end, things like money and power can be used to protect someone dear, but what creates them are also willpower and desperation. Kim believes in these values and tries to pass them on to the boy. At every moment, He tells him not to give up, claiming that he will succeed, as long as he dedicates himself enough. Suho, however, cannot continue even though he has reasons to do so. For his part, Kim reassures the boy and gives up the game, even though he is not defeated. Then the host says that the king has won and the game is over. Sometime later, the boy receives some bandages, but complains about the pain. Jin Yongchio says that with the money he won, he could go to a hospital instead of complaining. Suho says that is not his style. So, Jin Yongchio asks how much he won. The boy says the amount was 700 million wons. In contrast, the protagonist lost 200 million, but at least he is alive as he had to pay for that. Knowing Kim, Jin Yongchio says he will find a way to recover the lost amount. Then,